Sega recently unveiled a trailer for Sonic Origins Plus, an updated version of last year's remasters of the classic Sonic games. Alongside adding Amy as a playable character and access to 12 Game Gear games, fans are hoping that Sonic Team takes this opportunity to fix the quote, broken mess of the original underwhelming release. With mediocre review scores, a scathing public rant from one of the lead developers on launch day, and glitch compilations flooding the internet, it's not hard to see why fans felt that way. All that Sega had to do was take the supposedly perfect Whitehead mobile ports, put them on a console, and then give Sonic 3 and Knuckles the same treatment. But hold on! What if I were to tell you that's exactly what they did? See, when I was watching one of the glitch compilations, I noticed that some of the things they were showcasing existed in the mobile ports. I should know, I highlighted these issues in a video I made on those mobile ports in April 2020, 2 years before Sonic Origins released. What if I also told you that Sonic 3 and Knuckles in particular make some improvements and add some flourishes which I haven't seen anyone highlight or praise? That I think this particular part of the package is woefully underappreciated in favour of exaggerating and memifying a few high-profile bugs. Here's the deal. I went back and I played the original Mega Drive cartridges, the Whitehead ports, and Origins back to back. I put them side by side and made direct comparisons. I put in the legwork that I've not seen anyone else do, and folks, Origins did not get a fair shake. Let's make it easy to identify which versions of the games are which. 4x3 footage is the original Mega Drive cartridge running on real hardware. 20x9 with the black borders at the top and bottom, that's the Whitehead mobile port. And finally, 16x9 footage is Sonic Origins. Also, this video will not be discussing Sonic 1 Forever, Sonic 2 Absolute, or Sonic 3 and Knuckles Angel Island Revisited. I agree that did the fans do a better job than Sega themselves is a valid question, but I think it's also a big enough topic that it warrants its own separate video to answer. The final thing I want to flag is that while my views of Origins are generally positive, I agree that it has issues, that Sega made mistakes, and that the release version was likely rushed out the door before it was ready, as they prioritised releasing the game on Sonic's birthday over completing due diligence quality control. Before the game had even released, fans turned on Sega for some of the decisions the company made. These were releasing an overly complicated chart showing DLC and a deluxe edition, pricing the collection of 4, technically 5, games at $32.99 GBP for the base version, and $36.99 for the digital deluxe edition. Removing previous, cheaper versions of the game from sale shortly after Rockstar had faced backlash for doing the same with Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Man, that is still a mouthful. Let's tackle these one at a time. The chart was silly, yes. It should have just been, here's what's in the base edition, here's what's in the deluxe edition. But Sega wanted to have their cake and eat it by also selling those deluxe features as standalone DLC packs, hence this widely mocked chart. Corporate's gonna corporate, right? It also should have been made clearer that the classic music pack was not a way to restore the original soundtrack for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. More on that later. Price-wise, I don't know, I'm not that mad. If you want to be a pessimist and say it's 4 games, then 33 divided by 4 is £8.25 per game. If you want to be an optimist and count Sonic 3 and Knuckles as 2 games, then 33 over 5 is £6.60 per. Comparatively, arcade archives are £5.79 per individual game. By the way, play Shock Troopers, it is amazing. Mega Man X Legacy is split into two $15.99 collections that work out to £4 per title, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection is $34.99 for 13 games, $8 or $9 if you want to discount multiple versions of the same game, for a cost of £2.69 to £4.37 per game. As far as I'm aware, those other collections are purely emulation. They are not ports. They have not had the same amount of work put into the actual games themselves as Sonic Origins has. For me, that does add some value to Origins. Where Sega shot themselves in the foot is that the mobile versions are a free download with adverts, or £1.99 to buy outright. When the games were still available on Steam, they were £3.99 each, as were the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 Backbone releases. The Sega Ages M2 releases, which are still available, are £5.99 on a console that offers 4 different ways to play Sonics 1 and 2, counting the Switch Online Mega Drive app, the M2 Sega Ages versions, the Mega Drive Collection compilation game, and now Sonic Origins. These are the most expensive versions of these games, and in my opinion, Sega did not do enough to acknowledge, explain, or justify that new, higher cost to consumers. Origins regularly goes on sale for 50% off, and that price point makes it much easier to justify a purchase. Removing other versions, I'm kind of split on this. The preservationist in me says, hey, the previous versions were a truer reflection of the original games. The rational side of my brain says it could cause market confusion and detract sales from the new release. Why would I say that the old versions were more accurate? Well, those were emulated versions of the original ROMs, and while emulation itself can introduce some inaccuracies, the Origins releases are ports. They are rebuilt from the ground up in modern programming languages to be as close to the originals as possible, but some things are bound to get lost or changed, whether on purpose or otherwise, in translation. Don't you worry, we are going to go hard on version comparisons shortly. I can't deny that this was a bad look, that was especially poorly timed given the aforementioned GTA controversy. It certainly didn't do Sega any favours, and I can empathise with the backlash to an extent. When release day rolled around, there were even more complaints, the biggest ones being some prominent and now infamous glitches, the use of the Sonic 3 beta music and the supposedly remastered Sonic 3 and Knuckles tracks sounding worse than they did in the beta itself, and inaccurate physics, supposedly ruining a key component of the classic Sonic experience. Let's take these in order too. The two I saw the most often were the Tails bug and the drill glitch. The drill glitch is pretty simple. In Marble Garden, the mini-boss appears briefly, drills into the ceiling, and some debris falls for a short while. In Sonic Origins, that debris keeps falling for way longer than it should. This is very noticeable and a tad distracting, but it doesn't have any detriment to gameplay or progression. I am surprised that, coming on a year later, this issue is still present despite being very widely reported. As for the Tails bug, put simply, when Tails goes off-screen, he's supposed to respawn and fly back into shot. In Origins, this didn't happen. He would instead constantly jump off-screen, leading to an annoying repeating sound effect. This has since been fixed, and we have some great insight from @LittlePlanetCD on Twitter, who investigated the source code. I'm going to try and explain this as best I can. Normally, there is a check to see whether Tails is within the camera's view. If this check returns false, then a countdown timer starts. If Tails returns to the camera's view during that countdown, the timer is cancelled. If Tails doesn't return within the time limit, then it triggers his respawn function and he flies back on screen near to Sonic's current position. The timer is called player.jumpInTimer and is value 43 of the player object's source code. The problem is that when Sonic Team added the drop dash to Sonic, they used value 43. Because Sonic doesn't fly in, that value appears to go unused in Sonic, or rather Player 1's code. It looked like they had a free slot to add the drop dash into. They didn't realise that the value is shared and referenced by Player 2's code. The value being overridden by the drop dash caused Tails' respawn timer to break, meaning his respawn function can never trigger. As mentioned, this has been fixed in a patch, but it is wild that an issue this obvious ever made it to a release version. I cannot believe that Sega didn't know about it, and it's the single biggest piece of evidence that launching the game on Sonic's birthday was felt to be more important than ensuring the game's quality. Release now, patch later at its peak. Earlier, I stated that some glitches exist in, and are inherited from, the Whitehead port, giving Oil Ocean's Donkey Kong barrels as an example. Likewise falling through bounce pads in Metropolis. During this playthrough, I did encounter a new glitch in Origins. Tails got crushed by these wooden boxes, which then completely disappeared. I tried to replicate this in the mobile version, but as far as I can tell, this problem is new and exclusive to Origins. The bumper glitch returns in a very obvious way in one of Sonic 3's bonus stages. The collision failed on me and unfairly booted me out of the stage multiple times. The special stages of Sonic 3 and Knuckles also had some weird behaviour. When Sonic hits a yellow spear and is launched through the air, Tails just sort of glides along the ground. These two issues have not been patched despite, again, being fairly obvious to see and replicate. That said, the majority of my runs have been mostly glitch and bug free. I believe the frequency and severity of the issues have been greatly exaggerated because hey, that's what gets clicks and views. I also feel that the internet can be an echo chamber where people would rather parrot their favourite creators than actually sit down to play the game or challenge others' opinions. Well, I just made some enemies and cancelled myself. For a long time, the PC port of Sonic 3 and Knuckles was derided for having different music for Carnival Night, Ice Cap, and Launch Bass. The MIDI versions of these in particular sounded awful, and the community speculated that these tracks were changed due to Michael Jackson's supposed involvement with the game's music and to avoid demonetization allegations against him at the time. Then, many years later, a beta for the Mega Drive version of Sonic 3 was unearthed, and lo and behold, it used the PC music. Only now, through the Mega Drive sound chip, it actually sounded pretty good. Following Michael Jackson's death in 2009, the same year Sonic 3 was re-released for Xbox Live Arcade and the Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection on both 360 and PS3, we would only see 2 more re-releases of Sonic 3 and Knuckles with its original soundtrack intact. Those were the Sonic Classic Collection on Nintendo DS, and the Steam version included in Sega Mega Drive Classics, both released in 2010. It's worth noting that, while Sega Mega Drive Classics came to both PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in 2018, Sonic 3 and Knuckles was noticeably absent. It's theorized that the deals for the 2009 and 2010 releases were already signed before Michael passed, and that his estate had to honour that. It's also reported that the Jackson estate then became, let's say, uncooperative and a blocker for Sega. If you're watching this, chances are that none of this is news to you. I distinctly remember a variety of videos talking about this topic over the past decade, and I'm not going to speculate further here. What I do know, however, is that the erasure of Jackson's apparent contributions started much earlier than many report. Sonic & Knuckles notably used new mini-boss music, as well as a different track for Knuckles himself when compared with the base standalone Sonic 3. When you lock Sonic & Knuckles onto Sonic 3 for the full game as we know it today, the old mini-boss and Knuckles tracks are replaced with the SNK versions. Couple that with the aforementioned swaps for the 1997 PC release, and it starts becoming clear as to just how early Sega distanced themselves from the musician. You'll also notice that all 3 stage tracks that were replaced are in Sonic 3, not Sonic & Knuckles, implying that they didn't bring MJ back for the game's second half. That wasn't the only potential difficulty. Brad Buxer, a longtime collaborator of Jackson's, is credited as having worked on Sonic 3 and Knuckles. His contributions to Ice Cap, and I'm going to choose my words carefully here, are noticeably similar to the melody of the Jetsons track Hard Times, with Buxer being the keyboard player for that group. Hard Times may be another legal hurdle to re-releasing Sonic 3 with its original music. Given that all of this has been common knowledge for a long time, I distinctly remember members of the community telling Sega that they didn't mind if re-releasing Sonic 3 and Knuckles meant replacing the problem songs with the beta music. Even so, when it was revealed that Origins would be using the beta tracks, fans were angry. Go figure. I think part of this is simply poor communication on Sega's part. The musical switcheroo wasn't confirmed until after pre-orders had already gone live and fans had put their money down. Sega should have given us full upfront disclosure from the start instead of being coy about it. When players got their hands on Sonic Origins, they noticed the music sounded worse than it did in the leaked beta build of the original Sonic 3. Common complaints were that the tracks sounded muffled. Now, I don't have much of an ear for these things, but even I have to agree that one of these things is not like the other. Weirder still, those with better ears than mine claim the tracks sound much clearer and cleaner in Origins' jukebox, a strange inconsistency. Now, with my ears not being great at detecting these things, seriously, I had various treatments for my hearing as a child and it's still not great now, I honestly can't tell you if this has been patched, changed, or improved. I'm just not that sensitive to these things. As we all know, classic Sonic games are all about their physics and momentum. As soon as Sonic Origins released, there were complaints that the physics were off, that the game just didn't feel right. For myself, I first noticed it when I hit this spring in Emerald Hill and got shot way further than I was supposed to, reaching the speed shoes. In the original game, that same spring consistently lands you closer to the second Coconut Spadnik. Something was definitely wrong here. This is where my side-by-side and back-to-back comparisons with the original cartridges were eye-opening. The first thing I checked was whether Sonic's jumps were affected by the slope of the terrain, and, as you can see, I got pretty consistent results across all 3 versions of the game. I then checked the minimum distance at which Sonic could go through a loop. Again, these results are fairly consistent. So far, so good. The first sign of trouble came shortly after. When Sonic makes it through the loop, you can see he reaches, and emerges from, the tunnel straight after it a little earlier in the mobile port and Origins. But hey, nothing game-changing, right? Sadly, the problems became very apparent in Springyard Zone. Look at the difference in speed, momentum, and heights reached while curled up in a ball. Both the mobile port and Origins are fairly consistent with each other, but neither is accurate to the original game. I started to think that there might be an issue in the acceleration and speed cap parameters. The biggest sign of trouble came with one of the special stages. Here's what happens if I enter this stage and don't press anything on the original cartridge. Now let's see that in Sonic Origins. I'm bounced much further and straight into an unfair fail state. Maybe people are right. Maybe Sonic Origins is a broken mess. Maybe Sonic Team did ruin the perfect Whitehead No, wait, the exact same thing happens on mobile. This is another issue that seems to be inherited from Whitehead's earlier work. I also found that these gears in Metropolis kept Sonic in his ball form and prevented him from jumping when they shouldn't. Going back to the Whitehead mobile port, the gears do have smoother rotation than they do in the original Sonic 2, yet their behaviour is fine. This issue is one I can confidently agree was introduced by Origins. On the other hand, the same zone sees object pop-in issues, and sorry to tell you this folks, those same issues are present in the Whitehead release. See how it's maybe not as clean-cut as some would have you believe yet? All things considered, bar the obvious instances like that spring in Emerald Hill and that bounce in the special stage, the game's physics felt close enough to me, a guy who has been playing these games for 30 years? Man, that's adding some more grey hairs. And that's playing these different versions of these games back to back, which I can't imagine many people doing. Yes, I can see a speedrunner saying these ports are unplayable due to their inaccurate physics, but to a standard player? A normie? Genuinely, this is fine. Sadly, the inaccuracies and my personal gripes don't stop there. There are subtle changes under the hood that I picked up on, and they're not for the better. I'm not going to repeat too much of my previous videos on the Whitehead ports, but the bosses, for me, are busted. The very first boss is a prime example. You can no longer hit Robotnik as he enters the arena, making this a longer fight, but the main problem is the aspect ratio. See, the platforms on either side of the arena seem to be coded to be a set number of pixels from each screen edge. This means in the 16:9 Origins, those platforms are further apart than they were in the 4:3 original game. Robotnik takes longer to travel between them, and the timing of the ball swings is then off. It just elongates the fight. This gets worse in the Whitehead mobile port, as my phone, like many others, is 20:9, making the arena even larger. This completely screws with your muscle memory. Seeing it side by side is quite something, and really hammers home the impact that this minor change can have. It's especially apparent in Aquatic Ruin, where the platforms either side are now much further apart, making it much more difficult to bully Robotnik. The camera also now follows Sonic, where it didn't before, meaning you can't see all of the arrows that are being fired below you, inviting unfair damage should you fall. Yeah, but Sam, what can they do? How about the exact same thing they did for other bosses, which is introducing temporary walls on either side? Or, even better, just keeping the platforms in their original position exactly as they did for the same boss when Mechasonic mimics that original fight. Some of the boss's cycles, patterns, and attacks are also off. In a previous video, I pointed out that the way the Death Egg robot launches its arms is wrong, and yeah, that is very much still the case. Earlier, I pointed out physics issues with the Sonic 1 special stages. In both the Whitehead and Origins ports, I find these also make the controls less responsive and the levels harder to play. I find the collisions, especially rubbing against blocks to make them disappear quickly, are wonky and unreliable. I also find the smoother rotation of the stage harder to look at, as counterintuitive as that may seem. What should be an objective upgrade over the original is somehow more disorienting for me, and I found the exact same issues impacted the bonus stages of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Maybe I'm alone in that? Let me know in the comments. The the Sonic 2 special stages were remade in the Whitehead port, moving from the original game's illusion of 3D to, well, actual 3D. That brings a lot of upgrades with it. A smoother frame rate, a greater draw distance, and a mostly fairer challenge, as you get a better view of, and therefore a longer heads up on, rings and obstacles. But if you put these side by side with the originals, you'll notice that the layouts, timings, and placements aren't one-to-one with the 16-bit version. Now again, a normie will not notice or care, but it throws my muscle memory for these stages off something chronic. As for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the only issue I encountered was the aforementioned gliding tails that I'm surprised hasn't been patched yet. The Whitehead ports of Sonics 1 and 2 had their own slick menus. These gave us two important features: time attack and save files, including a level select for cleared saves. Origins strips away these menus, and I kind of get it. You don't want two sets of UI, you don't want too many speed bumps into getting into a game, but Origins menu doesn't give us an equivalent save feature for these games. Origins also weirdly keeps CD's internal menu, so why have they taken two different approaches? The game's story mode, where you play every game back to back, places Sonic CD in between Sonics 1 and 2, and it kind of makes CD feel like an anime filler arc. Sonic 1 ends with the 6 Chaos Emeralds showing Sonic a vision of West Side Island, the location of Sonic 2. We're supposed to believe that, instead of going directly to West Side Island, Sonic travels to Never Lake, meets Amy, and coincidentally has another encounter with Robotnik before heading to West Side Island? No, the ending of CD shows he goes there to get his biplane so that he can fly to West Side. Okay, cool, but the main menu map shows us he travels further, over water, in the opposite direction in order to do that. It also means that Metal Sonic was created before Mecha Sonic Mark 1 or 2, even though Metal looks far more finished and refined than Mark 1. Although, yes, Mark 2 looks like an evolution of Metal in my eyes. Maybe you could say that Mark 1 and the Death Egg itself were incomplete in Sonic 2. Perhaps you could argue that Metal tried to outspeed Sonic, and when that didn't work, the mechas were created to outfight Sonic, Robotnik transitioning from fight fire with fire to fight fire with water. But then that doesn't explain Robotnik going straight back to using Metal again afterwards. My head hurts. I also get that CD doesn't really fit anywhere else because 2's ending leads directly into 3 and Knuckles' opening without a proper gap in between, and it would be weird to go from 3 and Knuckles back to CD from a gameplay standpoint. Look, Nick the Game Apologist has a whole video on this. Go watch that, it's awesome, but yeah, this still doesn't sit right with me. What's that? This video was supposed to be a defense of Origins, and so far all I've done is complain about the release. Huh. Alright, let's look at what it does get right, where it does deserve praise, because I feel like there's a lot that's going unsaid. These mainly relate to Sonic 3 and Knuckles because, well, that's the bulk of the new content here. Several in-game cutscenes and animations have been enhanced. For example, in the Hidden Palace Zone, Sonic now looks at each emerald as it transforms. At the end of Sonic 3, we now see Robotnik escape as Sonic watches. Tails also gets an intro cutscene showing the fox arriving on Angel Island, where the original game didn't feature anything. Likewise, the ending of Sonic 2 has additional sprites showing the Death Egg crashing on the floating island, although this was originally added in the Whitehead port, so cannot be attributed to Origins. A+ Start created brand new sprites for Super Sonic, replacing what had previously been simple recolors of several of Sonic's poses with brand new Super Sonic artwork. These are fantastic, seamless, and I can't wait to see how great a job he's no doubt done for Amy when Plus releases. Speaking of, Knuckles' intro from Sonic & Knuckles is now restored. Granted, Air did it first. Also, minor thing, where Sonic 2 originally gave him pink arms in the special stage, Origins now fixes that, as well as giving us an option for Knuckles and Tails teaming up, which makes my inner Sonic the Comic fanboy incredibly happy. On the subject of restoring content, the original Sonic 3 featured the Big Arm boss fight for Sonic, a tense and climactic final showdown that I've always loved. This battle is skipped in Sonic 3 and Knuckles on original hardware, which has always been a disappointment and downgrade. Yes, I did an entire Sonic 3 All Emeralds playthrough just to capture 5 seconds of footage for this comparison. Like and subscribe, damn it. Origins restores this fantastic and often overlooked battle, albeit with the newly added danger of falling off the edges of the platform. In the original Sonic 2, you lost all of your rings when you exited a special stage. This could be particularly deadly when the star post is next to a boss encounter, like this one in Mystic Caves. Origins makes it so that you keep your rings. This makes hunting the Chaos Emeralds much faster and, in my opinion, more enjoyable than in any other version of the game. Before you ask, no, this was not inherited from the Whitehead port. That still spits you back out with 0 rings. And no, this doesn't make the game too easy or go against the original developer's intentions. If you lock Sonic and Knuckles onto Sonic 2 so that you can play Knuckles in Sonic 2, a really imaginative title, you will find that the game lets you keep your rings after a special stage. This was originally revised and patched in the 90s, kids. I should know, I was there. Oh hey look, another grey hair. You can also retry a special stage at the cost of coins should you fail in the Origins port. You can pause and retry a stage in the Whitehead version, yes, although in that release it's on you to have the initiative and realise that you're about to fail. Sonic's fox friend gets a lot of love in these releases. In the original Sonic 2, Tails was just a skin. He couldn't fly or swim. The Whitehead ports gave him those abilities in Sonic's 1, 2, and CD, giving the Fox gameplay parity with his Sonic 3 and Knuckles incarnation. Tails can also now give Sonic a lift and fly him around for a short time in single player, which is incredibly handy in certain circumstances. It's something that you can't do without a player 2 in the originals. I checked. It also means Sonic can now access some special stage rings and other areas that he previously couldn't. In the original Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Tails could only unlock his super form by obtaining all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and then all 7 Super Emeralds. In Sonic Origins, Tails gets his super form as soon as he has collected the Chaos Emeralds, bringing him in line with Knuckles and Sonic. Again, yes, I recorded getting all of the emeralds in both versions for a fleeting comparison shot. Don't say I didn't make the effort. Sadly, this change doesn't retroactively apply to Sonic 2. Getting all of the emeralds there doesn't unlock Super Tails, but you can play as the form using cheat codes. The Whitehead ports introduce cheat codes that really expand the classic Sonic games, allowing you to play them in new and exciting ways. Want a fire shield in Marble Zone? Here you go. How about a bubble shield for Labyrinth? Consider it done. Having the elemental shields provides a brand new experience for veteran players like myself. There's a whole suite of options you can play around with through these codes, such as having Tails join Sonic in Sonic 1, or, you know, adding a 7th Chaos Emerald and Super Sonic to that original adventure. No biggie. Pardon the pun, but this kind of stuff is transformative, and I don't understand why these toggles are hidden away in a place that most people will never find and enjoy. Sega, these need to be front and center. I actually love how Origins presents the games. You have the various islands from the classic titles, including Spinball, representing each game and the options menu. These are really cute dioramas that subtly change as you complete the games, grab the emeralds, that kind of thing. Sure, charging for DLC that lets you have minor control over the camera here is kind of scummy, but let's separate the developers' efforts from the corporate greed for a second. People complain that the menus for the art gallery, jukebox, and videos are kind of bland when compared to Sonic World from Sonic Jam, a fully 3D environment that you could explore. You went to a cinema to watch the bonus movies. I think people forget that while that was awesome for Jam's bonus content, the actual game selection screen looked like this. If I have to pick one area to get all the love and attention, granted, I shouldn't have to pick, I would rather the effort go into the game selection screen than the bonus menu. Sonic Origins swaps out the live system for a coin system, and I actually think this is kind of brilliant. Lives are an antiquated game design philosophy from the era of arcades and weekend rentals. They serve the publishers, not the players. They simply don't have a place anymore. Swapping from lives to coins updates Sonic for modern sensibilities, while still retaining an incentive to earn extra lives. The coins can be spent on unlocking animations, concept art, and music. In fact, these unlocks actually incentivize me to do more than I usually would in Sonic 3 and Knuckles special stages. In S3 and K, you can wrap around a group of blue spears to turn them into rings. Getting all of the rings earned you a continue which, if you're playing well enough to be perfecting special stages, yeah, you don't need these. In Origins, getting that same perfect awards you free coins which you can spend on those sweet unlockables. Sure, this incentive goes away once you've unlocked everything, which you can easily do after a single all emeralds run of the game's story mode, yet I still think it's worthy of praise. Also, the ring counter now counts down instead of up, better communicating the effort required and incentivizing players to keep going. You can also earn coins by completing missions. These are short mini-stages that present you with a challenge. They're short, they're simple, they lean a little too much into the modern over-reliance on generic blocks as level design, true. It's also new playable content though, even if the Oil Ocean one demonstrates just how broken jumping across the oil is in this release. The biggest addition is the animations that play at the start and end of each game. These are gorgeous, fun, and an absolute highlight of the overall package. I absolutely adore these. You can also unlock the animatics for a behind-the-scenes peek, and all of the similarly well animated Mania Adventures shorts are included as a bonus too. The effort put into these cutscenes shows a level of care and passion that perhaps isn't as evident in the rest of the package. Nonetheless, these new animations should still be respected and praised. I hope that by now we're agreed that while Origins is not as terrible or broken as the internet echo chamber makes it out to be, there are still opportunities for improvement. We already know that Sonic Origins Plus will add a playable Amy to all of the games, as well as Knuckles to CD. I'm hoping that also means that we get the debut of Super and Hyper Amy, and that those forms spike her quills up in a reference to Fleetway's Sonic the comic. I would say come on A+ start, make it happen, but at this stage the sprites are already done, and even if they weren't, I doubt he watches my tiny channel. Obviously, I hope that all of the outstanding issues and inaccuracies that I have pointed out are finally fixed, and that this is a free patch that releases alongside the paid Plus DLC. I would love to see some CRT filters. Options for the visuals are noticeably lacking, and other games such as Fight and Rage, Street Fighter 30th Anniversary, and oh yeah, Sonic Mania and previous releases of Sonics 1 and 2 have all shown us that these filters can better replicate how these games looked when we first played them in the 90s. Although, given YouTube's excessive compression, those filters might unfairly look like garbage here. I want the options hidden in the cheat code menus to be apparent and obvious. I need that save feature from the Whitehead 1 and 2 ports. I shouldn't have to start a new game every time I want to play as a different character or revisit a past level. The classic mode, which I haven't touched on much in this video despite recording a bunch of footage for it, needs to have toggles to restore original behaviour, such as Robotnik being hittable when he enters, instead of just a cropped version of the remasters. There are calls to replace classic mode with the M2 Sega Ages emulation, and you know what? Yeah, I would happily take that over the current half-hearted implementation. Of course, getting the original music back for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, even as an option, would be great. Personally, I prefer the beta Carnival Night over the original release's clown music, but man, I miss the original Ice Cap theme. Speaking of, can we get Air or Sonic 3 Complete style toggles for the zone order, level layouts, etc? Might be kind of a long shot, I would appreciate it though. Separate note, can we have the option of playing the standalone Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles? Sometimes I'm not in the mood for the full epic, but I could happily chew on one half of the adventure. I'll be back in 3 months' time to see how Origins Plus turned out, which will immediately date this video. I also want to take a look at Sonic 1 Forever, Sonic 2 Absolute, and revisit Air to consider whether the fans really did do a better job than Sega themselves. That said, I think the base version of Origins is fine. Not great, but passable. Yes, Sonic deserves more than just fine. Sure, there's plenty of evidence to support the narrative of release now, patch later. I just can't agree with the wider internet's absolute roasting of it. I especially can't stand the hypocrisy and inaccuracy of claiming that the Whitehead ports were perfect until Origins somehow ruined them, when I've demonstrated that simply isn't true. If you want more content from a guy who doesn't just parrot everyone else, who puts the work in to investigate these things and present his findings, even when he knows he's going to be attacked for doing so, you know where the subscribe button is. I can't promise regular uploads, but I can promise high-quality content that's comfortable with telling you things that you might not want to hear. For now, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.